This 90s sitcom is widely believed to be a spin-off, but it's not. That story and a lot more next. Hi everyone, welcome to Retro Flicks, your channel for movie and TV retrospectives. I want to start off by saying if you were here in the last video, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this again for those that might be new to the channel. You're going to see me like this for probably a while, but I have a band-aid on my nose because I had a fall and cut my nose pretty bad, so I apologize for the way I look. But again, I'll probably be having to say this for several videos perhaps. Maybe at some point I'll be like, I'm not going to say it anymore. So, but anyway, today's episode, the show must go on. Today's episode features a 90s sitcom, while in the same universe, is not a spin-off of the sitcom Cheers, which we just did. This sitcom that we're going to do today, this 90s sitcom, is the sitcom Wings. Wings. Very underrated sitcom, I think. I think it just was hilarious. Great writing, great chemistry, but as we're going to see a little bit later, didn't actually do very well in ratings, although it did last quite a long time. In a nutshell, Wings follows two brothers, Joe and Brian Hackett. They're both pilots, and they own Sandpiper Air, which is a very small one-plane airline on Nantucket, Massachusetts. Now, Joe initially owns this company, but later down the line, he will sell half of it to Brian, and they will become partners. And this airline is going to be in an airport which is named Tom Nevers Field, which is a fictitious name. The conception of this television show, it was created by and produced by David Angel, Peter Casey, and David Lee. They were showrunners on the sitcom Cheers, which we just did. And showrunners are top-level executive producers. But after several years, they decided to go on their own and create their own television sitcom. And they wanted to do a workplace-based sitcom. And they were in, I think, actually still in that area at a small airport. And they went through the small airport and they saw a ticket counter, a lunch counter, seats where people were sitting, and people filing through and walking through and working, and thought this would be a great setting for a workplace as an airport, a small little airport. The main cast consisted of these major characters and who played them. Joe Hackett, as we've already mentioned, we'll start off with the brothers here, of course. Joe Hackett was played by Tim Daly. And Joe Hackett's a highly responsible, compulsively neat, very much a role follower. Again, as I said earlier, he initially owned Sandpiper Air before bringing in Brian as a partner. Just a fact here, Bryan Cranston, who you might know from Breaking Bad fame, auditioned for this role, and obviously it went to Tim Daly. Brian Hackett, who played by Steven Weber. Now, Brian Hackett's really the opposite of Joe, which becomes a big source of conflict between the two brothers. Brian is really more carefree, can be very irresponsible. He had many opportunities like a scholarship to Princeton. He got into the NASA program, but he'd either drop out or get kicked out. Before he became famous on ER, about 3 or 4 years later, George Clooney actually auditioned for this role of Brian Hackett that eventually went to Steven Weber. Helen Chappell, she is going to be a childhood friend. And she works in the airport as well. She's going to work at the lunch counter. And she came to Nantucket from Texas. The actress who played Ellen Chappell is Crystal Bernard. Crystal Bernard actually is from the South, and she has a Southern accent. When she auditioned for the role, Angel, Casey, and Lee really liked her, but also knew it was going to be set in Nantucket, Massachusetts. How are we going to explain away her accent? And Brandon Tartikoff, who we mentioned in the Cheers video, who was still a part of NBC back at this time, still president, he told them, it's up to you how you do that, but just explain it away however you want to do it. So they decided to explain it that she was born in Texas and then moved as a little kid to Nantucket. But she never got rid of her accent. And she's a really bubbly, perky character, certainly a character though that doesn't take anything from anybody. But her lunch counter is not what her goal is in life. She's a musician and plays the cello, and so a lot of the time there's that part of her character is that struggle to try to realize her dream of playing, particularly in a symphony, playing her cello. Next is Faye Cochran. Faye Cochran is going to be the ticket agent for Sandpiper Air, working for Joe. Joe met her before he started the company, and they became friends on a flight. She was a flight attendant. She was about to retire, and he told her that he wanted to start an airline. She said, "Well, I'm going to retire." She goes, "If you start that airline, I'll come and work for you." And she did. So she was Joe's first employee, and really his only employee until several series down the line, whenever he has to hire another pilot. And Faye is a very interesting character. Again, she really knows what's going on more than Joe does. And she oftentimes runs the company. Obviously, she's very knowledgeable and very experienced. She has been married a lot of times. Every husband that she had, I think 3 times, every husband she had, his name was George. So she said if she ever married another George, he would die pretty quickly. The next character is Roy Biggins. Roy Biggins runs the competing airline in the airport. So there's Sandpiper Air and another airline across the waiting area, and that is Aeromass, and Roy Biggins owns that. The character's name is Roy Biggins. Roy Biggins is played by David Schramm, and he is a very competitive, arrogant, generally unpleasant guy, and he has 7 airplanes, so he's very successful in his airline business. And don't you think he doesn't let Brian and Joe know that every day, which is a part of obviously his arrogance and a part of the conflict that those two factions have with one another. So there's a lot of barbs that are thrown between the Hackett brothers and Roy. And next is Lowell Mather. He's going to be the mechanic for the airport. So he works both with Sandpiper and with Aeromass. And Lowell Mather is played by Thomas Hayden Church. This role was specifically created for Thomas Hayden Church. Thomas Hayden Church actually wasn't known at all, but did a guest spot on a series, on an episode of Cheers in the later series, like the last year or two of Cheers. He did a guest role on there, and it was a very short guest role, very, very short. But Angel, Casey, and Lee really liked him and thought, we're going to use him again, and certainly kept him in mind when they created their own show, Wings, and they wrote Lowell Mather to fit his personality and to fit him. And Lowell Mather is basically a dim-witted type of a guy, but very congenial and very nice. He will certainly occasionally, he's not the best of friends. He did grow up in Nantucket like everybody else. It wasn't the best of friends with Joe, Brian, and Helen, but he becomes that and does a lot of things socially with them. Thomas Hayden Church, unless you want to watch it, I won't tell you what happened, but Thomas Hayden Church would leave in the series, I think after season 6, I believe, he leaves Wings and starts his own sitcom with Deborah Messing called Ned and Stacy, excuse me. The next character is Antonio Scarpacci, my personal favorite, and he is played by Tony Shalhoub. Now, this character actually originated in the 2nd season as a waiter, just doing a one-shot guest shot on a episode in the 2nd season. But they liked Tony Shalhoub and playing that character of Antonio Scarpacci so much that they decided to fit him into the cast. So in season 3, they decided for him to keep that character, but would switch him into a new profession, which would be a taxi driver. So he's going to be doing a taxi service in and out of the airport. So he'll be spending a lot of his time in the airport waiting for fares. Antonio's pretty mild-mannered. He's a hopeless romantic. He spends a lot of his time trying to get a girlfriend. So that's kind of the interesting thing about Antonio. Next is Casey Chappell, which Casey Chappell actually ends up being there for the last 3 seasons and goes right to the end. She plays Helen's sister, and she's played by Amy Asback. Amy Asback, who would then actually marry in real life the late John Ritter. And Amy Asback played this character and as Helen's sister. And what she is, well, where this originated was that she's going through a bad divorce from her husband. They lived in San Francisco, really lived a high-end life, but her husband left her, and so she comes back to live at Nantucket, and that's a source of really big frustration for her because she's used to having a lifestyle, a pretty high-end lifestyle, and now she has to live in Nantucket where there's not a lot going on, and she has to really change her whole life, which is a really big disappointment for her and very tough for her to do. So that's basically some of the cast. Let's look at the Cheers tie-in here. Again, when you look at the title here, this has always been looked at as a spin-off of Cheers, but it's not. There isn't anybody in the series that originated other than the show creators, but as far as the cast goes, there's nobody that originated in Cheers. Okay, the only one that really was ever in there that I know of was Thomas Hayden Church, but just for one shot, one time. But this is not. It's not a spin-off of Cheers. Now it's in that universe. And particularly because of Angel, Casey, and Lee working on Cheers for all those years and creating this show. So they ended up bringing on Cheers cast members to play their characters on Wings. So for example, Norm and Cliff, those characters are on an episode, and then Frasier and Lilith come on an episode. So in that regard, it's in the universe, but it is not a spin-off. Now, what's also in that universe but is a spin-off is Frasier. Frasier is a spin-off of Cheers, taking Dr. Frasier Crane over and having his life, what's it like after Cheers. So that is a spin-off. But Wings is also in that universe as well. And one of the things that happened on that is Perry Gilpin, who would end up playing on Frasier, starring on that show as Roz Doyle, was in an episode of Wings, playing a date of Brian's when they were all trying to get dates on a video dating service. And also Tony Shalhoub and Rebecca Shaw would guest star on episodes of Frasier as well. So they all kind of lived in that universe, but again, Wings is not a sitcom, and it's widely believed that it is, but it is not. The ratings in episodes. The years 1990 and 1997 were the years this ran. 172 episodes, only 2 top 20 seasons. And that was in season 3 and 5. There were 18 in season 3 and 5. When I looked at that at first, I couldn't believe it when I saw that. It went 8 seasons, 172 episodes, but only 2 top 20 seasons, and both those were 18. Most series would have been finished probably after the second season. But it still lasted for 8 seasons. So there's something about this, and I know there's something about this. I love this sitcom. I think it's great. But it's amazing that it didn't really catch on back at that time. But it still lasted for 8 seasons. So they just hung around. But obviously the execs at NBC still really thought something of it. But yeah, that just blew my mind. The theme song is unique. It's a classical piece. It's Schubert's Piano Sonata number 20 in A major. So that's something I didn't see a lot of too, but that's what it's unique about the Wings too, is the theme song is a classical piece. And I'm going to try to link that up top so that you can bring that up. In 2014, Tim Daly did an interview with the AV Club, and this is what he said about Wings. Quote, like a lot of people, I hadn't really appreciated Wings until sort of recently. It didn't get very good reviews, and it wasn't like Hip, It wasn't Seinfeld, it wasn't Friends, it didn't really have a reputation as a hot show. And it kind of made me feel a little bad. I was like, hey, how come nobody likes this show? Well, in retrospect, being many years removed from it, I look back at it, and that show was really great. It's hilarious. And we were very good. We were really funny. I couldn't agree more with you, Tim. Where can you see this? TV sitcom. If you have a subscription, you can see it at Paramount Plus and Prime Video. It used to be on Hulu, but they took it off, I think, a few months ago. The last I saw, it still wasn't there. So again, Paramount Plus and Prime Video. Thank you very much for being here. Again, I love doing this with you. Love seeing you again. And please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and let you know when new episodes are out and keep in touch with you. Again, comment down below, what are some of the memories that you have of this? Do you have any favorite episodes? I remember I didn't watch too much of this when it was on television at the time, because I was in college, and then I was after college and other things. I just wasn't watching it. But I remember at one point it was on USA Network, and I was working a shift, like a 3 to 11 shift, and I would come home and it was always on like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night for like 3 hours. And after work, I would just come home and watch it until like 3 in the morning. And that's when I really got into Wings. And so this is a great show, and I've really been watching it ever since. Anytime it was on TV or now streaming, I watch it. I watch it all the time. If you haven't seen this, watch a couple episodes of it. Give it a shot. Come back, comment, tell us what you think of it. Until next time, that's a wrap.